Welcome back guys to another Odyssey video and to the probably craziest build I have ever made. After last week's discovery of the absolute crazy 2 billion damage glitch, this week I will present you with a 100% consistent 2 billion damage build. With this amount of damage you can even use Sparta Kick and kick every boss directly where it hurts. But why should we even waste adrenaline if you could just use a light attack to do the same? 2 billion damage actually means a 2 with 9 zeros. That is the maximum possible damage you are even allowed to get in this game. And you will be able to deal this with every possible attack in the game. This build will make your damage 100% consistent, 2 billion damage for every attack, and I've even added 90% melee resistance for it. Now you might wonder how this is even possible. If you haven't seen last week's video, here's a brief summary how to do this. You have to bring your damage below a minus 100%. When you do that, your damage in your inventory screen suddenly turns negative. This will make the damage overflow and the game will just think it's 2 billion damage. To get your damage negative, you have to use the minus 100% damage from the second sight engraving and combine it with the assassin conversion if you want to make your warrior damage negative, or with the warrior conversion if you want to make your assassin damage negative. But there's a way to use this for all three damage types at once. First, we have to bring our warrior damage to be 2 billion by making it negative using the two mentioned engravings. Then we use the big combo to also make our hunter damage become 2 billion, and our assassin damage can be simply replaced with the knife of Dalvon, which will make our assassinations always work even if we have absolute zero assassin damage. This will create the absolute ultimate build that deals the maximum possible damage for all three damage types, and you will still be able to assassinate everyone with 100% consistency. To achieve that, you have to make all your attacks to be in the positive range. Your damage is so high that it will cycle between positive and negative 2 billion. In order to fine-tune your build, you first have to adjust your critical damage to make all your melee attacks become positive, and the magic number I found for my build is 525%. It is very important that you don't use any other further damage modifiers. Only use the damage modifiers that were actually shown and used for this build, then you will make all your warrior attacks become always positive. No matter what enemy you fight, no matter what direction you attack, it will always work. After your melee attacks, you should fix your range attacks by adjusting your headshot damage modifier. Similar to your melee damage, you should also make sure to use exactly the same amount of headshot damage with no further modifiers for any of your abilities. If you copy everything from this build, including all the masteries and all the abilities correctly, your light attack will deal up to 2 billion damage, your heavy attack will be 360 billion, the charge attack will be 2 billion, as well as Ring of Chaos, which will also be 2 billion, Fury can go up to 1.6 billion, and your overpower attack, even in the first hit, will already deal 2 billion damage. The maximum possible damage for your range attacks, no matter which enemy you attack, will also be 2 billion damage for Devastating Shot, 2 billion damage for the Predator Shot, and even 2 billion damage for the Multi-Shot. No matter which attack you use, it will always be positive. And your assassinations, of course, will be 100% guaranteed, even if you have absolute zero assassin damage. With the Knife of Dalvon, you can simply assassinate everything, completely ignoring your assassin stats. Using the Knife of Dalvon will of course make your health only be at 25%, but with 90% melee resistance you can even take up to 4 hits from enemies while playing on Nightmare. But to be honest, there's actually nothing that can even get close to you or even attack you, except for when you use a torch, because the torch is likely the only weapon that doesn't deal any damage with this build. And for that reason, it is extremely important to follow this build exactly and copy every single ability and mastery point. If you use too many mastery points or if you use the wrong perks, you could end up with your abilities dealing no damage all the time. So it is extremely important to just pick what is needed to get. Even if there's a perk that is supposed to increase your damage for a certain attack, by using them you could end up dealing no damage for this attack. A single percentage point can be the difference between dealing no damage or 2 billion damage. So follow this build exactly like it is shown. But now let's finally check out the build, guys. As you can see, our warrior damage gets below 0, which will make our warrior damage in fact be over 2 billion damage. And thanks to the big hand bow, our hunter damage will in fact also be 2 billion, and thanks to the Knife of Dalvon, all our assassin attacks will be guaranteed assassinations. So in fact, we have 2 billion for all attacks and 100% guaranteed assassinations. For all of this to work, it is extremely important that your real warrior damage stays below 0. If your warrior damage actually goes into any positive value, this will no longer work. And since the assassin conversion would also increase our warrior damage if we used assassin damage, we have to use hunter damage on almost all our items. That's why we use a perfect sword with hunter damage, damages swords and critical damage, and here we engrave the convert 50% assassin damage bonus to all damage. Sadly, there's no quest to get this item, but you can simply use a blacksmith reload until you get all the perfect items for this build. For the second melee weapon, which we normally don't use for our attacks, we will use the Knife of Dalvon. The Knife of Dalvon gives us the guaranteed assassinations, but it also has assassin damage and warrior damage. As long as you don't add more than 49% warrior damage to your build, you would still be below minus 100%. So this item will actually only add 32.5% warrior damage, and we would still be below minus 100% and could still do the glitch. The engraving we have to place on the Knife of Dalvon to make all of this work will be 50% critical damage. The Knife of Dalvon can be found when you have the Corfu Island, which is a free DLC. You just have to escape the prison. It is an unmissable story item. On the big hand bow, we will engrave the 200% headshot damage but minus 100% warrior and assassin damage. This engraving can be unlocked from the second side bow, which can also be found on Corfu Island from the legendary chest in the pirate warehouse. The big hand bow itself is a glitched item and the only item that also uses your warrior damage as your hunter damage, and the only way to deal 2 billion damage with your arrows. On the helmet we go for hunter damage, headshot damage, critical damage and the usual 20% crit chance. If you get any helmet with any of these engravings, they can be in any order, just get 2 of these engravings and engrave what is missing. For our bracers we will use the Stolen Isu bracers. The Stolen Isu bracers also have assassin damage but 30% crit chance, and we will engrave 30% melee resistance on them. Even when we add another 12% warrior damage from the converted assassin damage, our warrior damage is still below minus 100% and we can still do the glitch. The Stone Iso bracers can be found in the 3rd episode of Atlantis in the fortified Doma of Meneseas. They are part of a story mission and you cannot miss them. For the belt we will use hunter damage, 100% critical damage while full health, 10% crit chance and another 30% melee resistance. And on the torso we will go for hunter damage, critical damage, 20% elemental resistance, and we engrave the 15% all resistance from the Greek hero set. Together with the masteries, this will give us 90% melee resistance in total, which is almost as good as 100%. Last but not least, on the boots we go for hunter damage, 100% critical damage, 20% crit chance and another 100% headshot damage to reach the sweet spot where all our range attacks will also be positive. The 100% headshot damage engraving can also be found on Corfu Island. You have to solve the Captain and the Cyclops Ostraka. The solution for that is right in the pod in Aleos village. I just want to stress again that it is extremely important to get all the same stats on every item with the exact same number of percentages to make all of your attacks deal positive damage. If you have a different build or if you are using different stats, you have to find your own sweet spots by adjusting your critical damage and your headshot damage. If you copy this build exactly as shown, you will reach exactly minus 105.5% warrior damage. All the other 2 damage types are completely irrelevant. It only matters that your warrior damage is below minus 100%. We will have 515% headshot damage, 30% damage swords, 100% crit chance and 525% critical damage while full health. Additionally to that, we will also have 90% melee resistance. By changing a couple of engravings, you can also make your sword deal permanent fire damage. For that, we will engrave permanent weapon damage becomes fire damage on our sword, so convert 50% assassin damage to all damage on the Knife of Dalvon, and exactly 50% critical damage on the Stone Iso bracers. Don't go for 100%, that would be too much, only go for exactly 50%. Then you will have exactly the same stats as in the previous build, hitting all the sweet spots to deal positive damage for all your attacks. But this time you will have a fire sword and only 60% melee resistance. Whatever you do with this build, but under no circumstances you should ever use the warrior mastery or the assassin mastery, because they would add both warrior or assassin damage to your build, which would completely ruin the glitch. You can safely go for 6th Sense, even when you're spotted it will double your hunter damage, but it will always still be positive. Arrow Master should not be used and you should always only shoot with normal arrows. Using poison or fire arrows could mess up the glitch and you will deal too much damage and your attacks won't be positive. Go for a multi-shot, devastating shot, predator shot, all of them will be positive. Archery Master can also be used because it is not important how much hunter damage you have. Hunter damage does not affect this glitch at all. Use 1 point on Overpower Bow Strike and get ghost arrows for your final hunter ability. In the warrior tree you can go for the charged heavy attack, but absolutely avoid getting Weapons Master. With this build you will otherwise have too much warrior damage. Gear Master can be used, flaming attacks and fire mastery are optional. The amount of fire damage will not affect your damage, but it will also not break the glitch. So you can use it if you want, but it is also not necessary. Overpower attacks will always be positive if you use a normal attack, however if you try to use an animation cancel they might not work. Fury, Ring of Chaos will also always be positive, and of course use Second Wind for your healing. Shadow Assassin should be completely avoided since the Knife of Dalwon will give you guaranteed assassinations. The only ability you really should get here is Stealth Master to lower the noise when you make your footsteps. The mandatory perks in the Hunter Mastery will be crit chance, critical damage and headshot damage. Optionally you can go for range resistance and adrenaline on headshot kill. Don't go for any points on warrior damage because it would break the glitch if you do so. Mandatory is armor penetration, optional perks would be health, total armor, melee resistance and damage dealt restored on hit. Absolutely don't go for assassin damage, don't go for any weapon damage here. Instead you only have to go for crit chance at full health, critical damage and damage while full health. Other optional perks would be chance to ignore half damage, elemental resistance and all the adrenaline stuff. Even if you have way more ability points than that, don't go for any further damage modifier, don't go for any additional damage increase. You might actually just break the glitch and your attack would deal no damage instead of 2 billion. This build is perfectly balanced and should be used exactly as shown. I hope you really like this build and you have a lot of fun with the new damage glitch. Please don't forget to subscribe, leave me a like and see you next time.